Alright, so the release of Britney Griner from Russian detention has just been announced just a few days ago now, and it's a pretty big deal because she's been in prison on trumped up charges for the past 10 months. It was right after Russia's war in Ukraine started, so it's seems like a political move on Russia's part, right? To use her as a bargaining tool as tensions were escalating, right? Using her as like a political prisoner, a bargaining tool, a bargaining chip, right? To as an implicit threat, like, oh, we can do stuff to her if you don't comply, or as a prisoner exchange, which is what ended up happening. So a lot of like left-wing people are very for this because they see this as a victory, her being released, but a lot of right-wing people do not think this was a good idea because of the trade-off that had to be made. So she was traded in a prisoner swap for Victor Bout, known as the Merchant of Death. So yeah, very scary name. Ooh, how can you trade someone with such a scary nickname for someone who's just a WNBA player, right? That's what they're saying. Well, first of all, yeah, Victor Bout has been in prison already for 14 years, and he's kind of been out of the game a long time, so not as a high value individual as a lot of people have you believe. But let's read this. So Biden's 10-month effort to free Britney Griner faced stubborn resistance from a Russian government bent on extracting maximum concessions from the WNBA star's release. And he also faced opposition from his own Justice Department, who viewed Thursday's one-for-one prisoner swap involving Griner and the notorious arms dealer Victor Bout as a mistake given the discrepancies of offenses by the two prisoners. And Griner is a two-time Olympic gold medalist. Yeah, she's not just a WNBA player. Right, that's what a lot of critics of this deal are calling her. Like, oh, she's just a WNBA player, because women's sports are a joke to these people, right? Because they're not very fond of women in general, right? So women's sports is a laughing stock to them, except for when it comes to trans people in women's sports. Then they care very much about the integrity of women athletes, right? So she was arrested outside Moscow in February for possessing a small amount of cannabis oil. Yeah, less than 1 gram of cannabis oil. Yeah, which I understand it's illegal in Russia, right? And a lot of these authoritarian states around the world, they're very anti-drug, right? And in America, we have it relatively good, right? Even though, like, there are still a lot of unfair drug laws. Even so, she was sentenced to many, many years for very minor possession, and she was charged for intent to distribute. Now, that's probably, yeah, not true. That's not the amount that you carry with you if you're a dealer, right? That's like for personal use. But yeah, of course they just threw the book at her just to get her the maximum sentence possible. Just probably because she's American, right? And they're probably not very fond of women either, right? Yeah, Russia has a pretty big misogyny problem, right? But mostly probably because she's American. Yeah, Russia is probably pretty racist too, but you never hear about racism incidents in Russia because, like, Russia is mostly white, but why is that, right? It's because they're racist. Spoiler alert. So, Victor Bout, whose arms fueled conflicts from Sudan to Rwanda to Afghanistan to Angola, is nicknamed the Merchant of Death, and his illicit transactions with violent regimes and other militant groups earned him a 25-year sentence in federal prison, and he had already served 14 of those years. So, and he was scheduled for release in 2029. Wait, does that mean he served 19 years in prison? I heard it was 14. So after the two passed within a few feet of each other on an airport tarmac in the Persian Gulf on Thursday, that must have been really awkward, right? These two people, I'm pretty sure they never met each other before, and this is, yeah. I wonder if they nodded to each other like, "Hey, thanks for agreeing to this prisoner swap." They probably, yeah. Must have been, yeah, really, really awkward, right? Public debate raged in the United States about how government handles prisoner exchanges for citizens it considers wrongfully detained. Yeah, so prisoner exchanges for Americans held prisoner abroad have always been controversial, right? This has happened before with terrorist groups, with North Korea, I think China too. Often it's with like governments or groups that are rivals of American imperialism, right? I remember during Obama, like they traded 5 terrorists for one Marine who was held prisoner, and that Marine was like a deserter, and that was a big deal, right? Yeah, honestly, don't know if that was worth it. But I mean, maybe an American is worth more than a terrorist, at least to America, right? Supporters of Griner had pressured the White House to bring her home, hailed the swap as a long overdue remedy to a travesty of justice. Yeah, I'd say it's worth it. I mean, she was in prisons again on trumped up charges. Again, like she probably shouldn't have like tried to like smuggle in cannabis oil, but like it's really not a big deal, right? Yeah, it was a mistake. She should have known, like, oh, Russia is an authoritarian state, police state, really strict with this kind of stuff, and if I get caught, they can really like punish me. Yeah, it was a mistake, but like she doesn't deserve to be in prison, right? It's unfortunate that the Russian government was able to use her the way that they did, but hey, we can't change the past, right? Now what we have to do is like try to remedy things. Critics, including Kevin McCarthy, said the trade was unconscionable and risked detentions of more Americans abroad. Yeah, this is an issue, like incentivizing other governments or groups, particularly like rivals of America, to capture or kidnap and imprison Americans abroad so that they can try to get ransoms for them. Honestly, that already happens, right? Like pirates in Somalia will or like any criminals like in the third world will like kidnap Americans, try to get ransoms for them. Or like anyone from like the first world, right? But honestly, yeah, we'll see later that there were more negotiations that were going on behind the scenes, and this prisoner swap was a very difficult decision to make. So these same disagreements played out inside the administration, cut across familiar bureaucratic lines. Negotiating for an exchange of prisoners often involves complex political trade-offs within different parts of the U.S. government, and the Griner About case was no exception. So yeah, if she were my relative, I would want to do the swap, but trading a notorious arms dealer for a blackball player is madness. Yeah, so... And then this exchange excluded Paul Whelan, a U.S. Marine veteran who is serving a 16-year sentence on espionage charges that the U.S. considers bogus. Yeah, so this was the big criticism from the right wing, like, how are you gonna exchange the Merchant of Death for Britney Griner, but Paul Whelan is still in Russian prison? Well, first of all, seems like Paul Whelan was a spy. Like, of course, the U.S. is going to say, no, that dude wasn't a spy. What are you talking about? Yeah, he was caught with like multiple passports. He was caught doing some sussy stuff in Russia. And apparently, this guy was a fuck up, right? He was dishonorably discharged and court-martialed from the Marines, and you have to really fuck up to get kicked out of the Marines, right? Like, he was stealing, embezzling, etc. We'll get into that, but yeah, a lot of Republicans are saying, like, we traded Britney Griner, who was just a WNBA star, and we're leaving Britney Griner, or we're leaving Whelan, who is a Marine. He's an honorable man who served this country. Well, yeah, not everyone who is in the military is a hero. I hate to break it to you. I hate to break it to conservatives, right? You can be a bad person and still be in the military, yeah. So, State Department officials had advocated a stop involving that would include the release of both Whelan and Griner, but Moscow refused unless the United States also secured the release of Vadim Krasikov, a former colonel from Russia's internal spy agency. So, and Krasikov is serving a life sentence for murder in Germany, and Berlin has made it clear that releasing him was a non-starter. Yeah, not only was this guy like head of or an official in the Russian secret police, but also, like, afterwards, he stopped being that for some reason. Maybe he was also, like, dishonorably discharged. Who knows? I mean, I'm not gonna find out. But he went over to Germany and killed somebody, apparently. Yeah, average Russian male here. This is the least psychotic Russian Russian military official. A guy who just, yeah, fucking kills people. Yeah, so yeah, releasing that guy in exchange for the shittiest spy in US history, Paul Whelan, probably, yeah, not worth it. If anything, it seems like Whelan, like, fucked himself, right? Just by being, like, the worst spy. In an effort to break the stalemate, Anthony Blinken jettisoned traditional protocol. I wonder what that means. Public pressure tactics did not move Moscow from its view that the release of Whelan, whom it considered a spy, required an additional high-value trade separate from Griner. Yeah, so when you're negotiating prisoner swaps, you have to, like, take into account, like, the magnitude of the crimes that these people did, right? Like, if you want Russia to release a spy, then you're going to have to trade. You're going to have to offer someone who is at least at the level of a spy, right? You can't. Unfortunately, they're not going to take anyone less. For totally illegitimate reasons, Russia is treating Paul's case different from Britney's. Well, yeah, we can argue about the legitimacy of the reasons, but it seems like Paul Whelan actually did some sussy stuff. Yeah, we can look at who was Paul Whelan later. Russia's demand for Krasnikov, an insistence that would only trade Griner for about one-on-one, continued until mid-November. The United States asked if Mark Fogel, an American citizen also imprisoned in Russia, could be included along with Griner. The Russians refused. I wonder if they traded Krasnikov for Whelan and this other guy, Mark Fogel. Yeah, but apparently Krasnikov is imprisoned in Germany, and Germany says, yeah, we're not releasing this guy. No way. Literally a murderer. Yeah, understandable. Administration decided to trade for Griner and keep negotiating for Wheeling and Fogel in the future. This was not a choice of which American to bring home. The choice was one or none. And I guess you gotta take what you can get, right? So yeah, the Justice Department, when it has been negotiating these prisoner swaps before, they say they adhere to a like-for-like rule in which only individuals of equal status or criminal history should be exchanged. Exchanging spies for spies has long been an accepted practice at both the State Department and the Justice Department. But federal law enforcement officials frequently object to proposed swaps of convicted criminals for people who committed relatively minor offenses. So yeah, everyone is saying, like, the Merchant of Death. Isn't that, like, such a scary name? Like, how could you release this guy, right? He's going to cause more death, right? They're saying, like, I'm back. Like, he's the Michael Jordan of arms deals, right? Merchant of Death walking back into Russia. So this guy says, yeah, a lot of these people who have just heard of the Merchant of Death for the first time have no idea who this guy is, right? This guy was like a guy called the Merchant of Death and left a US Marine behind in Russian prison in the process. Yeah, they're saying, like, there's some guy called the Merchant of Death. Now that's a really scary name, isn't it? Right? The Canadian, wait, he's Canadian? Wait, what? Was he a Canadian but a US Marine? He was dishonorably discharged from the Marines for larceny and was in a hotel room in Russia during the Trump administration when arrested. And yeah. Apparently, the Merchant of Death did not actually contribute to any Americans dying. Yeah, well, actually, apparently he did some weapons deals in Afghanistan. Right, as well as Serbia, Yemen, etc. Right, so yeah, not good, but he was in a hotel room in Russia during the Trump administration. I wonder what that means. And yeah, if this one guy is the Merchant of Death, what about, like, all of the American weapons manufacturers who benefit from war all the time? Right. The Merchant of Death when he touches down in Moscow. Yeah, right. So yeah, a lot of folks are latching on to the Merchant of Death nickname for Victor Bout to make themselves feel like experts on this case. Like, dude, he's the Merchant of Death, dude. Don't you know that's, like, this guy's like a really bad guy, man. How can you trade him for just a WNBA player? Yeah, they're playing up the value of this guy and downplaying the value of Britney Griner to make it seem like a really bad trade. But yeah, they don't know anything about this guy. So he was not doing a life sentence. He was scheduled to be released in 2029. Releasing him only 6 years early is totally worth it for Britney Griner, who was sentenced to at least like 2 decades, right? Yeah, this guy was already imprisoned for 14 years. Extradited to the US in 2010 after 2 years of legal proceedings and conviction on terrorism charges a year later. So yeah, at least 14 years. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Now 55 years old. He has not been due to be released until August 2029. Yeah. So yeah, this is the kind of like overconfident, arrogant, like faux intellectualism. Like, these guys used to be an expert on vaccines, now all of a sudden they're foreign policy specialists. Yeah, so not only was Victor Bout, like, scheduled to be released in a few years anyways, he's also, since he's been in prison for so long, he's been out of the game for a long time, right? He doesn't have the same kind of connections that he used to. And the game has changed a lot in the past 14 years, right? Back in 2008, weapon systems were a lot different than they were now. And especially with the Ukraine war happening right now, I'm sure that a lot of people have grown to fill his place in the Eastern European arms dealing trade in the business, right? If anything, Bo the Fifth Column said that if anything, he would likely be used as like a shield himself, as like a political pawn. Probably used as like an example of the Russian government actually getting something done, right?